all of you. A big welcome to this CCI's webinar of every Thursday evening. Today, we are going to talk on the really hot topic of today's time, which is Omicron. Is it a boon or is it a bane? Well, we often are now considering viral pneumonias to be our nemesis. They are really tough and they are changing their nature and their shape and their presentation in a very rapid fashion. To keep all of you abreast and updated with whatever is latest as regards to viral pneumonia, in particular reference to Omicron, today we have an extremely experienced panel with us. We have Dr. Mahamir Modi sir, who will be kindly moderating the session. He is director of Modi Clinic and a pulmonologist of Ruby Hall, Pune. We have our CCI West Zone Governor, respected Dr. Agam Vora sir, who is also medical director of Vora Clinic from Bombay, with us as a panelist who will be guiding us on this Omicron session. We have a very special panelist in the form of Dr. Ratnamani ma'am, who is a senior clinical microbiologist and head Department of Microbiology from Apollo Hospitals, Hyderabad. From Hyderabad, also joining us is Dr. Ugand Bhattu. He is a consultant pulmonologist at Yashoda Malakpet. We also have from Punjab, a senior consultant and head of the Department of Pulmonology and Critical Care from SPS Hospital, Ludhiana, in the form of Dr. Gurpreet Singh. A big welcome to all of you. And now I would like to hand over the proceedings to Dr. Agam Vora sir to proceed with today's webinar.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Ravi bhai, those kind words of introduction and the context setting. The program today is a boon or a bane. Basically, it means good or bad, beneficial or harmful. Boon means a thing that is beneficial, the thing that is helpful, and a bane means something that would cause irritation, distress, annoyance, something that is beneficial and affliction, both. So when I was thinking about this boon or bane, it reminded me of that story. Mahavir bhai, you remember that story of a laborer who is working by the river? He's working on the river bank with his axe, and suddenly a mishap happens and the axe falls into the river. He is now disturbed. His only daily bread which he's going to earn with the axe is gone in water, and he's so upset. So he prays for God. He prays, and finally God turns out of that blue sky and says, "Yes, my dear, tell me, what do you want?" And that poor man can't think of anything, and he says, "I want my axe which has fallen in this river." God puts his hand there and comes out with a golden axe, and he offers it to him, and he said, "No, this is not my axe." And then God goes again and takes out that silver axe and gives him that. He said, "No, this is not my axe." And finally, God brings about that wooden tuta axe, and he says, "Yes, this is my axe." And pleased with his honesty, God offers him all three axes. And clearly a boon. But after a few months, again, he's on the same river bank, but this time is with his wife. And, they are probably spending some good time there. And suddenly, wife falls in the river. So he's disturbed. Again, he prays to the God, and God comes again, and God says, "Yes, what do you want?" And goes in the river and takes out Katrina Kaif. And the poor laborer accepts this. "Yes, she is my wife." So the same thing could be a boon or a bane. It can be boon for that laborer, but bane for Vicky Kaushal. Or even simpler, their wedding itself could be boon for him, but I'm sure bane for a lot of us. Talking about COVID, it proved boon to technology world. It proved boon to this Zoom, boon to this Swiggy, Zomato. Also proved boon to 95 mask industry, the sanitizer industry. But look at the bane. It proved a big bane to mankind in general. Anyway, I must thank CCI, Dr. Krishna, Dr. Narayan Pradeepa, and Narendra, Ravi Bhai for the opportunity given. Before I move further, I have a fantastic news to announce, and that is today is Ravi Bhai's younger son's birthday. And I will request him to come on screen with his entire family and introduce his children to this extended, bigger family. So Ravi Bhai, get set. We are waiting for you and your younger ones to come on screen. COVID came as a big surprise and we were all pushed against the wall. We tried everything in our fight against it, right from those ivermectin days, those HCQ days, those minerals, multivitamins, antibiotics, old antivirals, new antivirals, steroid, biologics, so many immune boosters, cocktail antibodies, vaccines. And finally, we were a bit relaxed. Oh, COVID is going down in our country. We are better prepared with boosted infrastructure. Yes, life was getting back to normal. Those drivers came back on duty, those cooks are in place, those housemaids are back to job, cinema started, restaurants opened, and we were so hopeful that yes, physical meetings are going to start. And I was so excited to meet all of you in person. And then came this new variant. So SARS-CoV-2 variant, which meets the definition of variant of interest, could be a variant of concern if it is met with increased transmission capacity, or it is sudden change in COVID-19 epidemiology. Suddenly you find a spot of new case coming up from small area or probably affecting a larger geographic area. You find there is increased virulence. You find there is change in clinical presentation. You find there is decreased effectiveness of public health program. You find the social measures that you have, the diagnostics that you have, the vaccines you have, the therapeutics you have is going short. Probably you're talking about variant of concern. And we had such variants of concern in last 1.5 to 2 years. The first one came somewhere, was picked up somewhere around in September 2020 from UK again, Alpha. Then came Beta somewhere again identified or earliest documented in South Africa, May 2020. Gamma picked up in Brazil, 2020, November. Delta, we saw bad Delta wave last year, October 2020. And then this Omicron picked up multiple countries last month. When I think of variants, these variants are nothing, but they're changing structures of virus for better adapt, for better survival. It keeps on changing its structure with those small changes, which allows it to escape from available treatment options. Like it happens with influenza all the time. You have different H and N variants troubling you every now and then. So is this Omicron a big problem? Is it mild? Is it more contagious? Will it be more lethal? Are few of the questions that bubbles up in your mind? I must put on records the Herculean task which is done by our members. We have selflessly worked in the fight against COVID without worrying about our own health, our family members' health, with minimum infrastructure we had, with minimal personal protection we had. We challenged this virus. 2,100 doctors have lost their life in our country against this fight. And no, we will not let this virus win. We are committed to defeat it. Omicron has got almost 30 different mutations in the original structure, and it has acquired increased transmission capacity. When I was looking at yesterday evening's data from South Africa, it tells me that with new admissions doubling every 5 days, up to 31% higher peak levels compared to their previous peaks, there is also increased admission in younger children. Luckily, most of this disease is found in unvaccinated people. And yet there is no signal on increased severity of disease. Most of us believe that yes, it is milder disease. There is a hypothesis, again, a growing hypothesis which says that a common cold virus and this particular virus, their genomic structure are mixed, and hence this has got more transmission capacity. It is believed that maybe in some host there was co-infection and there was a genetic mixture, so which has led to development of this strain, which would mean that this patient would be transmitted faster, but it will have milder disease, and this would improve the herd immunity. So it may be a very big boon where you have a rapid transmission going on and there is fantastic herd immunity developing. But a bane for someone like me who thinks that with higher transmissions going on, even if the mortality is very small, say 1% mortality even if I peak, but when I see thousands of getting infected again, and I have fear that even if you have antibodies, even if you have previous probably infection, you can still get reinfected with this new variant. We are talking about actually huge number of deaths. There are initial reports which make us feel that cocktail antibodies that we have currently may not be effective against Omicron. And maybe new cocktail which is there in pipeline may end up getting emergency approval. So maybe a big boon for GSK and maybe bane for Cipla. Newer virucidal drugs may come more handy with less loading dose and shorter duration of treatment compared to what you have, and hence boon for maybe molnupiravir and bane for favipiravir. So we have lots to learn today. I must thank CCI and the entire CCI for making this initiative, for clearing a lot of myths, a lot of doubts that we have in our minds. We will learn today about the fears this variant may carry and about the viral pneumonia in general. Before we start today's meeting, I must make the announcement that we have a fantastic conference coming up right in this month, next week, which is going to be our South Zone Meet, Chennai, and I'm sure you're going to find that detail in no time during Friday, Saturday, Sunday, coming 17 to 19 December. And we have carved the excellent program for you. So you're going to get a chance to meet everybody in person. You will have a fantastic scientific feast. The venue chosen is fantastic, and you are aware of CCI's hospitality. So please don't wait. Please book your tickets. Waiting to see you there. Without wasting much time, let's tighten your seatbelts. Let's set and go. I hand over to Ravi Bhai for family introduction first, and then to move with CME program. Over to you, Ravi Bhai. Or maybe Mahavir Bhai, are you going to take over? I goofed up, it seems. I thought Ravi Bhai is going to start. Or maybe Dr. Mahavir Modi, may I hand it over to you for starting today's program?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Agam sir. It was an excellent overview about what a boon and what a bane is. And really nice. The context setting has been absolutely perfect. So we all know that we are going to face this, whether we are going to face this new wave or whether it's a blessing in the disguise, this Omicron. But we shouldn't forget that we definitely have a lot of other viral pneumonias also, and Omicron also is going to be a similar kind of maybe a viral picture, or it's going to be a different kind of viral picture. We never know. Just to set the context, I am going to present a case with all of you, which is definitely not a case of Omicron, but a case where we all come across in our day-to-day life. And this is about a viral pneumonia. So this was a 21 years old female who came to our Ruby Hall clinic with dry cough, generalized weakness, vomiting, dyspnea on exertion, and high-grade fever, which was continuous for last 7 to 8 days. So the patient was immunocompromised as she was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia in 2018, only 21 years old girl. 6 cycles of chemotherapy was given, and after that the patient underwent allogenic bone marrow transplant in 2018 itself. The patient was diagnosed as Addisonian's disease in 2019. She again had COVID-19 in August 2020, but fortunately, although she was immunocompromised, she was treated only with home quarantine. The patient is also a known case of hypothyroidism. So the patient came to us with such kind of complaints, and she was put with the IV antibiotics because one of her previous sputum samples showed Klebsiella pneumoniae, which was sensitive to cifoperam sulbactam. Clarithromycin was also added for atypical coverage, and the patient, thinking that the patient might be having a seasonal influenza, it was a common trend that patient in the last few days that we were seeing a lot of influenza cases, and the patient was treated even with oseltamivir. The patient required oxygen support. She had total count of borderline raised neutrophil predominant. Procalcitonin was normal, and sputum culture showed no growth. So this is how the clinical presentation, where we are not able to pinpoint what is the exact cause of her pneumonitis, and This is her CT scan picture. The CT scan picture shows that there is a pneumonitis on consolidations which are bilateral, patchy. Some of them are peripheral, looking like COVID, but this patient's RT-PCR was negative and she was already infected in August 20. So we were not knowing what exactly we are dealing with the immunocompromised patient. So we sent a respiratory biofire panel. And if you can see the respiratory biofire from the lower respiratory tract specimen, that is from the sputum and not from the upper respiratory tract. So this showed human metapneumovirus, which was detected, and human rhinovirus, which was detected. So there were two viruses which we could identify. The patient was not responding to the medications, whatever we gave, although her fever subsided, but she had intractable cough and a respiratory, she was requiring nasal oxygen. She was put on ribavirin, which is an antiviral drug, and 400 mg 3 times a day for 7 days. And the patient started showing clinical improvement. And this is a CT scan, which is done after 2 weeks of giving ribavirin and other supportive therapy. So this is basically to know that we all have community-acquired pneumonia coming as a presentation as or viral pneumonitis. So viral pneumonias, they have been described, especially in hematological malignancies and in patients with transplant recipients, and they can cause severe distress and death. This is something surprise to me when I looked into the data, and there was a large epidemiologic study by CDC in community-acquired pneumonia, which showed almost 62% of the pathogens, or in 62% of the cases of community-acquired pneumonia, there were no pathogens identified. Only 11% were attributed to the bacterial pathogens, 22% were only viral pathogens, and 3 to 5% were viral and bacterial mixed infections. So if you see, almost 22% of our community-acquired pneumonia can be viral pneumonias. Whereas one more surprise was data from hospital surveys show that the viruses are important cause not only of community acquired but even the hospital acquired pneumonias and as much as bacteria. And in one survey, almost 22.5% of hospital acquired pneumonias were viral in origin. So if you see in CAP, influenza remains the most common virus, followed by parainfluenza virus, RSV virus, adenovirus, human metapneumovirus, rhinoviruses, and of course the group of coronavirus family. So I think today's topic of discussion about Omicron is also going to be one of them because the coronaviruses are common cause for viral pneumonias, and as per one of the surveys, almost 22.5% of these cases of community acquired pneumonia cases were viral pneumonias. Among the hospital acquired pneumonia, RSV and parainfluenza are the most common. Why do we feel that these viral pneumonias are becoming more common? Of course, because of the pandemic and because of this COVID, but there is an increasing vaccination maybe amongst this pneumococcal. There are rapid identification methods which we have a microbiologist, Dr. Ratnamala, so she will be able to guide us about what are the different kind of identification methods. And we have aging populations. So they are all contributing to more and more diagnosis of these viral pathogens. So without wasting much of the time, we should move on to our interest of today's topic, which is viral pneumonias. And among the viral pneumonias, our basic concern is definitely about the Omicron, which is a SARS-CoV-2. And after setting up this perfect combination of what is this Omicron by Dr. Agamora, I would like to ask certain questions, and we all will like to discuss about what is new and how we can protect ourselves, how we can diagnose our patients at an early date, and what are the different challenges what we are going to face with this particular new entity. So thank you everyone, and I think we can start with the discussion. So Dr. Agam sir, your valuable comments, and then we can start with the question answer sessions.
Oh, this was very interesting when you showed the data, which says that so many hospital-acquired infections are also viral. That is very interesting. I was not aware, or I did not even think about it, that hospital-acquired infection could be also viral. And then by and large, you end up treating all hospital-acquired infections with antibiotics without much of virus etiologies in mind. So I think that is eye-opener statement. Good. I think we move on with the discussion.
So I think we all know that we are all going to face, or we are not going to face. These are all question marks, but we'd like to know more. Maybe we have an eminent microbiologist, Dr. Ratnamani. So we'd like to know from you, what do you think about this new virus and what are the different mutations? Dr. Agam sir just mentioned that around 30 different mutations are seen in this COVID-19, and we have initially we had alpha, beta, and then delta variant, and now this new variant which is coming up almost after 2 years, when we were thinking that we have almost won the battle against COVID. We were all going to back again with our daily life, and this new variant has come. So we'd like to know from you, what are these mutations and what is actually, how it is going to be different from the original or Delta variant? Is it going to replace the Delta variant or the microbiological structure of this particular virus?
Okay, thank you and good evening, everyone. So so the basic nature of a virus is evolution, like a human being, and mutations are nothing but virus adaptations to the host. So in the process, so they keep on mutating. Of course, some viruses mutate less, some viruses mutate more. And in the process, it adapts, and some mutations help the virus, some mutations do not. So those mutations which do not help the virus are dropped, whereas some mutations which help the virus for its binding, for its survival, it will help in further propagation of the virus. So I believe that any virus wants to propagate. So usually the virus, as it mutates, it should not have severity. And of course, when it mutates, it's unfortunately some of them do get severity, but the intention is that it will not try to finish off the host, because it needs to propagate from one patient to other or one person to other. The second thing is there are many mutations happening in it, but not all end up in like the variant, what we call lineages, then variant of interest, variant of concern, and variant of high concern. So like in this Omicron, like even alpha variant has S, what we are talking about, S drops and S spike drops. Even alpha variant has. It's not that the others don't have. The problem with Omicron is that there have been huge mutations in the spike proteins. Like overall 50 out of the 30 itself are in the spike proteins. So, and most of our vaccines, most of our neutralization, everything is targeted against the spike proteins. That is the reason we are worried about the immune escape. We are worried about the therapeutic escapes. It's very early to say whether this has really led to the severity, whether, because what we have, like as of 1st of December, there was a paper from South African Medical Association where they have seen the rates of reinfection. So the major concerns now are reinfections, which will occur early within 90 days with Omicron, which has been evidenced. Severity is yet early to say, because whomsoever we have seen till now in the South African, our younger population, and as Dr. Vora said, in the unvaccinated people, vaccinated people, that it has been milder, not seen much. And the third thing is that it's too early to say whether it's going to replace. If it replaces, we have to see the severity is not more with this disease. Then possibly we are looking at slight decrease in the pandemic, and maybe it will become like a milder disease continuing in the community and replace totally the Delta variant, which was much more severe. As of now, I think we still have to await the data, because inside we are too early, and I don't think we should speculate anything unless we get more robust data arriving out of it.
Okay, thank you. So as you said that, yes, there are different mutations and not all mutations will be dangerous. There are mutations like, for example, the Delta variant had almost 16 mutations, but this particular is having almost 30 mutations. And we are still in a pipeline, so we don't know whether it is going to be really that infectious, whether transmissibility is going to be more. But looking at the overall picture, what I would like to know from our esteemed panelists that, do you see viral pneumonias as a common threat in your practice? So maybe Dr. Gurpreet can take this. And how much is the percentage of viral pneumonias as such in your clinical practice?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, CCI, for giving me an opportunity to be the panelist. Definitely with the COVID-19, it was an eye-opener, and it has given us an insight about the viral pneumonias. But if we see in our practice, every year we are getting community-acquired pneumonia, as you have mentioned in your presentation. These small patchy pasties on CT scan, sometimes we think this is bacterial only. But with the advent of new techniques like PCR or BioFire, you will be able to diagnose more of viral pneumonias. For last 12 years, 10 to 12 years, we have seen H1N1 swine flu cases from 2008, 9, 10, and then MERS. Influenza also is quite common, but this is what we need to know, that we have to diagnose them properly. All community-acquired pneumonias cannot be labeled as bacterial pneumonias. So there are different ways to diagnose these. One is definitely seasonal. With the change of season, the viral pneumonias will be more. So history taking is important. The incubation period is important. Your epidemiology is important. Then you have various tests with you, starting from your very simple test like complete blood count, which will tell you about whether it is towards bacterial or viral, like neutrophilic predominant. Very high TLC count, very high WBC count will tell us about more towards bacterial. Then, as you mentioned, sputum cultures are important. Then you have tests like procalcitonin. It is a good test which can differentiate between bacterial and viral pneumonias. So with the insight about viral pneumonias, it is very important that we shouldn't throw antibiotics on each and everyone if they are coming with pneumonias. So viral pneumonias in these years, dengue also, it can present with pneumonia, viral pneumonia, like a ARDS picture. Malaria can present like this. So many viral diseases can present like changes on the CT scan or your respiratory symptoms. You have chickenpox, varicella can present. And definitely, we have seen many cases in the past. Even we have seen enteric, that is Salmonella bacterial, which I think there are very few case reports, but we have diagnosed enteric-related ARDS. So it's very important to pinpoint or to delineate what is the cause of pneumonia so that we can treat them targetedly.
Excellent overview. And I think you are absolutely right that we have lots of viral pneumonias. We cannot label each and every community-acquired pneumonia as bacterial pneumonia, and especially the surveys which are showing that a lot of viruses are there in so which can cause this viral pneumonitis. So as you rightly mentioned that there are very few tests which will be able to differentiate between these viral pneumonias versus bacterial pneumonias. So we'd like to know again from the panelist, maybe Dr. Yugandhar, you can take this. Are there any specific diagnostic tests for viral pneumonias over the bacterial pneumonias, and especially when we have this newer variant like Omicron coming in picture? So you feel that are there any specific tests which can diagnose this viral pneumonitis?
First of all, good evening, one and all CCI group, and thank you for this opportunity. And as rightly mentioned, this particular differentiating of viral pneumonias from the bacterial, most of the times patients will admit with a viral suspicious, end up with at the time of our bronchoscopy or whatever sputum analysis. It's a mix of both, blend of both, bacterial superadded infection with the started of viral infections. So FILMARRAY assay will be good for this particular to differentiate as Gurpreet sir told the PCTQ will differentiate between two. FILMARRAY assay will also upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract virus can be differentiated with a PCR technology. And this it can be done with routine sputum and BAL, but better will be with a BAL deeper sample. And by this, we can identify even influenza A, B, and also H1N1, as we know. And apart from the viral infections, we do have this more number of these days that before Omicron and at the end of second wave, we do get that dengue is more prevalent apart from the other pneumonias, and scrub typhus, leptospira. These are the three atypical organisms which are more common in our end of our workup. People are presenting with, patients are presenting with community acquired.
Absolutely, very right. So as you said that there are no specific tests for diagnosing these viral pneumonias clinically, or unless we do a specific RT-PCR or maybe this multiplex PCR assays. Yes. So we'd like to know maybe from Dr. Ratna, you can tell us about how these tests actually, so for this Omicron also and for COVID, we are doing a lot of RT-PCR. So whether our routine RT-PCR is going to show us about this Omicron variant, or there are any specific genomic sequences which only will be able to know about it. So what are the different RT-PCR? What is this multiplex RT-PCR? What exactly does it do? And are there, how much is the sensitivity, specificity when you are taking an upper respiratory sample or a lower respiratory sample? How do you actually rate this into the clinical practice?
Yeah. So molecular diagnostic has really revolutionized the diagnosis of especially not the bacterial, but viral. It has really helped us because at one time we used to only depend on antigen testings or antibody testings. And with the advent of PCR, whether in the form of a nuclear NAT testing or nuclear amplification testing, or it is whether RT-PCR or a multiplex. So the basic difference between a multiplex PCR and a single-plex PCR is that a multiplex PCR picks up multiple organisms or multiple pathogens. So it's like what Dr. was talking about, film array or a BioFire is a syndromic-based one. So it has something for a respiratory panel. So you know that there is a plethora of viruses which affect upper respiratory along with some bacterial and atypical bacteria. Similarly, you have a pneumonia panel where there is a predominance of bacterial pathogens because it also targets hospital-acquired pneumonias along with viral and atypical. So multiplex PCRs based on the syndromes picks up these viruses or bacteria. There are sometimes multifactorial, there is a bacteria as well as the viruses, like we sometimes see strep pneumoniae along with a human rhinovirus or an enterovirus. Whereas when you come to an RT-PCR, so RT-PCR is nothing but a real-time PCR detection. So it is mostly single-plex. Sometimes you can have 3 to 4, but there are some technical problems when you have more than that targets. So RT-PCR, basically, you know that, okay, you are checking for COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. So you will have a kit for that particular SARS-CoV detection. Now, there are different methods for its identification. It can be S gene, N gene, E gene, what we are talking about. I know now many of the people and non-clinical people also know what is an S gene now, thanks to Omicron. So now, Omicron, the concern is that the S gene is a dropped out. Maybe it's a surrogate marker. What is being told is that it will, all our PCR kits as such are not only dependent on S gene, whereas along with it, we have other genes also simultaneously being checked. Those are still there. So we will not miss an Omicron variant and it will be picked up. Only thing is we will not be able to differentiate what strain it is unless we go for a sequencing. It might be a Delta variant or it might be a Omicron. Unless some labs which are using a specifically S gene based, then they know that with an S gene drop, possibly it is an Omicron variant, but it still needs to be confirmed with a whole genomic sequencing. Now, like in Hyderabad itself, we have 3 centers, Gandhi Hospital, which is a government hospital. We have CCMB and CDFT, which are doing this gene sequencing. And as a part of a study, we are sending all samples which are positive for COVID-19 to these for sequencing. So it has been going on for some time now. And after this Omicron was detected, we have been sending the samples from the high risk areas also. So as such now, till now, we have not got any intimation from them about the Omicron variant, but that's how it works. The RT-PCRs, there should not be worried that it will give false negative. We will pick up the COVID infections. Whether it is Delta or Omicron cannot be told if we are not using specific kits, and it will have to be sequenced. Meanwhile, ICMR is also working on coming out with some kits which will detect this spike gene failure kit. So they're concentrating on it. So maybe in a few weeks, we might also see this coming out into the. But otherwise, for detection of general viral pneumonias, multiplex PCR has been a huge help to us. At least we have been having the experience for the past 3 years with it. And as my colleagues were telling, that we are seeing lots of RSVs, we are seeing lots of human metapneumonia. In fact, we were seeing influenza AH3, which actually we never used to think is there in the community. So there are many new viruses or emerging viruses which are also being picked up because of this multiplex PCR.
Thank you. Excellent overview. So we all know that. So this respiratory BioFire or rapid multiplex PCR has definitely been a boon for treatment in viral pneumonias. And for Omicron also, although there is a S gene deletion, but still our routine RT-PCR should be able to diagnose this. So, and there is one more concern that now there is a lot of say about that 5% of your RT-PCRs should be submitted for the genomic sequences. So is it truly happening, as you said, that in your hospital, you are sending each and every sample for these genomic sequences, especially after this Omicron? So is it really happening? And I would like to know, even from Dr. Agam sir also, that is it possible that in our maybe in Mumbai or in Pune where we have centers, we may be sending it. But is it happening in periphery that 5% of these positive samples are actually subjected to genomic?
That's a fantastic point, and this really happens whenever there is any outbreak. Forget outbreak. Whenever there are samples sent like this for viral studies, genomic study happens in 5% of the samples across the country in most of the viral lab in government or municipal setups. Now, this system may get paralyzed if number of samples sent are more. Suppose if you do 1 lakh sample a day, then to do 5% genomic sequencing may be technically difficult. But for so many years, years after years, this is the regular practice to do so, and that is the only way to understand how the mutations are happening and how the viruses are changing its sequence, and that is how you probably improve your vaccine strategies or incorporate those changes in the vaccine required. So that is happening. Now, when it comes to private setup, it depends on private setups, institutional protocols, and in fact, you can keep on asking for the genomic sequencing in any patient you feel. Only thing is it is costly, not easily available, and time consuming. Second thing is, it is not going to help you much in that patient's management. Genome sequencing is more for epidemiological understanding and strategy making, not for individual patient management. So that's my take on it.
Wonderful. Absolutely right. Yes, Dr. Ratna. So your view on this?
I agree with Dr. Vora. That's what it helps in understanding that. Of course, one thing is, once you know that there is an alert has come and you want to know, and especially for preventing the transmissions, because you know that it's highly transmissible. So there are, like recently now again, Union government has told that for patients who are having Omicron positive, they have to be kept in a separate block, away from the other COVID patients. So at that level where you have to look at the continuity of the transmission, it helps. Otherwise, it has a lot of epidemiological significance. That is why for us that Indian Society for the SARS-CoV consortium, genetic consortium, which was formed, it keeps on accumulating and keeps studying for it. So it has a lot of implication even for the vaccine preparations, like when you go for influenza, where you have southern and northern hemisphere vaccines. So that's how it helps.
Yes, point well taken. So I think we should leave it for the epidemiological studies and not for the individual management of the patient. But as a clinician, if we come across these more and more new variants, and there is something which is known as RO value, which has also been of a lot of these implications. And for example, in South Africa, when 22nd November, they diagnosed their first case. So before that, in mid-November, they had around 800 cases per day. Around 280 cases per day, and then after the first this detection of this Omicron, the cases increased up to 800 per day. So they were not all because of Omicron; they were all still because of Delta variant or maybe because of the B variant. But the overall surveillance has increased, and because of which the number of cases have seemed to be increased. The RO value of any virus is how much is the infectivity of this particular virus. And it is said that the Omicron has the highest infectivity, and the doubling time is, if I am not wrong, it is 1.2 days, the case doubling time, as compared to even the Delta variant, where the doubling time is almost 1.5 to 1.7 days. So what is your take on this, that is it really going to be of concern, especially the rapid transmissibility, and is it because of these 30 different mutations, how we can use it in our clinical practice? Yes, anybody can take. Dr. Agam sir, your take on this?
Yes, this is going to be definitely a difficult situation. It has got the very high R naught. It is going to be infecting more and more number of people, and then we saw that in Delta variant also. See, what is different in this is there is lack of the hallmark features, that is smell and taste is not much disturbed with this particular variant. That is what is the different presentation that we've come across. Second thing is the infectivity in children. We did not see that kind of children getting infected in previous experiences, but this is going to be that way difficult scenario. We are kind of prepared for adult storms happening, but if it comes to children or pediatric cases getting infected, I'm not too sure whether we've got that kind of boosted infrastructure. Yes, it is going to be a difficult situation. Even if I take it as very negligible mortality, say with the previous wave, we realized 15% of them really go into the hospitalization phase or serious phase or pulmonary phase, and about 5% of them will have serious catastrophic outcome. if I take even 1% with Omicron, and if Omicron is going to involve a larger population, the actual numbers that I'm going to deal with are going to be huge. So that is my fear. And as per the different calculations that I get to read, I'm told that probably in February is the time when we are going to see the peak coming in because of this variant. So I have my fingers crossed for this. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Ratna, your take on this R naught value? Is it going to be really of concern, especially when we are thinking about this Omicron?
Yeah, so I was also looking at the various data which is available. So highest when we see usually with virus is with the measles, which is around about 15. So one, like R naught has the significance that one person infects how many persons. So as of now, whatever data is available, it's placed between 8 to 15. So it's quite high if you look at the transmissibility. And yes, I hope that we don't end up in a wave like that. That's a second wave, which we had, hoping that, because that time we had a lot of people who were not vaccinated. So as I'm saying, it's too early to say. We have to be prepared. We have to keep our resources ready, like how we had cross-functional training, how we did during the first time, keep the oxygen supplies, ventilators. I think we have to be prepared because this pandemic is still ongoing. We have not come to the end of it. So we need to be prepared for it.
Absolutely. So we are now have discussed about the R naught value, the infectivity of the virus, and we all know that maybe it is going to rapidly spread. And if it is rapidly spreading, as Dr. Agam sir has said, that even the mortality of, even if it's a negligible mortality, but if the number is very huge, it can be a problem, especially and like places like in Michigan and in US where the COVID centers were closed around 2 months back. Or we were always 2 months behind these centers, and these centers have now again started having the COVID centers. So maybe we may face a wave, we may not face a wave. It's very difficult. It all depends upon the patient's overall COVID appropriate behavior, and it all depends a lot about the vaccines. So now I would like to know from all of you about what is your take on vaccines, whether whatever the vaccinations what we have done up till now, and we have crossed more than this 1 billion population, but still only 56% of our population has single vaccination, and the gap between both the vaccines is huge. Almost 25% of our patients, although they are taken, 56% is the huge number for taking the one vaccine. But if you consider both the vaccines a complete immunization, it's hardly 30% of the population. If you see in South Africa, where 1/4 or the 1/3 of the people are vaccinated, but still they had very rapid spread of this Omicron. And what do you think that whether these vaccines are really going to be effective in preventing this Omicron? So maybe Dr. Gurpreet, I would like to know your views on this, whether the Covishield, Covaxin, what are the vaccines we're using at present in India, are they going to be useful in preventing the reinfection with Omicron?
Yes, definitely. The vaccines have played a very, very large role in preventing the spread of infection. Even if this Omicron, I believe, is there, probably we may have milder infections. The hospitalization rate definitely is going to decrease. The severity of illness is less, definitely. Right now, also, we are getting COVID-19 patients admitted in our hospital. They are requiring oxygen, but to my surprise, they are improving also very fast. The thing is, right now, we know the pathogenesis of the disease very well. We know what drugs to be used at what stage of time. Not to use steroids early, use antiviral drugs early. If definitely if the patient is at risk, the patient is obese, the patient is diabetic, chronic kidney disease, cardiovascular disease. So high risk patients, we are able to pick up early. We are able to treat them early. Definitely vaccination as well as herd immunity to some extent is helping our population as of now. But as Dr. Vora is saying, we have to keep our fingers crossed. We have to be prepared. The awareness has to be there. The COVID-19 appropriate behavior has to be there. So these are preventive measures which has to be there. And along with that, early pickup should be there. Vaccination definitely, as you said, still it is 65% of the population who have got one vaccine, and there is a large gap between the second dose. In US, the Pfizer people, they are promoting the booster dose, and they have shown that with the third dose, the neutralizing antibodies are up to the extent of 25-fold, which they are saying is quite adequate to neutralize even Omicron. Definitely, we know there is a T-cell mediated immunity also, which is happening with the vaccination, and probably that is also helping our patients. So definitely the armatorium which we are having right now in the form of vaccination has to be implemented across the population. Everyone should get it, and the time may come for a booster dose. Like for influenza, we are propagating annual vaccination, maybe twice a year in both the season, as in Western countries. Similar thing is going to happen for COVID also. It has to be there. It will become an endemic. Right now, with the usage of influenza vaccine, now we are seeing very less cases of severe H1N1 cases. Similar thing will probably happen for COVID-19 also in coming years. So definitely across the population, vaccination is very, very important. Whatever we have, whether it is Covishield or Covaxin, they are working very well. Other vaccines are also working well, and in the time to come, we will have more vaccines available in our country also, and it is going to help our population.
Thank you, Dr. Gurpreet, and excellent point. As our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji also, he tweeted few days back when we all were discussing about whether we need a booster dose, but he said, and what he said was absolutely for the benefit of country, that we have to promote people for the second booster dose, and maybe the second dose, not the booster dose, the second vaccine, so as to make our population to decrease the gap between the first and the second vaccinated people, and especially immunocompromised patients, those who are at high risk. So they also need to get vaccinated very soon. So we shouldn't think about the booster, but we should always think that maybe these two vaccine dosages, the complete vaccine itself, can decrease, may not be the milder infection, but at least the severity of the infection. And we have seen that even the patient, those who are getting reinfected, maybe with the Delta variant, so these people have very less hospitalizations, they had very less deaths, and there is no enough data at present to know whether the vaccine is going to be really effective against the Omicron. But maybe, as you said correctly, that it is not only neutralizing antibodies, but it is the T-cell immune response, which is very important, and that may be the reason that we may have some benefit of doubt with this our routine vaccination also. So I would like to know your view on, Dr. Yugandhar, whether one vaccine is going to be better. For example, Covaxin is a whole virus vaccine, whereas your Covishield is only virus vaccine for the spike protein. So is it going to be one vaccine going to be better than other for preventing this Omicron reinfection, or you feel that the mixing and matching of two different kind of vaccines is going to be better? Dr. Yugandhar, and then followed by Dr. Agam. I would like to know views of both of you on this.
Yes, sir. Regarding the mixing, that will be better only. But technically speaking, whole genomic vaccine like Covaxin will be preferable in terms of it's only theoretical explanation that it scores over Covishield in terms of spike protein mutations which are occurring in Omicron. And rather than taking any booster dose, as you rightly said, completing the second dose of whole country, we have to encourage, just like our inhalation technique, we are spending some time for smoking cessations for some time with the inhalation technique. Similarly, let complete the second dose, not think about the Omicron, whether it comes or not, we don't know, and whether it is going to be a endemic or say a third wave pandemic, we don't know. But stick with your weapons and utilize those weapons properly, because very clearly we witnessed, all of us, including our panelists and everybody, even though most lethal what we are discussing, that Delta variant has protected very well by this two-dose vaccination, particularly in healthcare providers. That was the practical large-centric, multi-centric clinical trial, you can say. Majority of the healthcare providers are saved only because of this proper two doses in spite of high virulent Delta variant. So I stick to completion of the two vaccine is most important. Mixing matching will be good. And Covaxin scores over Covishield in technical aspect. I don't know how it is into practical. As Gurpreet Singh said rightly, T cell mediated immunity is the main immunity against any virus. So, which is not measured by objective evidence like monoclonal, whatever antibodies, circulating antibodies. That's why whether antibodies are good or bad, even after vaccination, you will be protected when compared to the non-vaccinated person.
Very well narrated. And then Dr. Azam sir, your view on this, whether one vaccine is better than the other, whether it is going to be effective, mixing, matching technologies.
Now, we don't have enough studies for this, so it would be very difficult to comment on it. If you ask me personally, I have always liked the whole Viron technology, and hence, as was discussed earlier, Covaxin technology I always liked, but most of us ended up getting only Covishield. So that's the reality. Now, I'm sure a lot of us have taken the third booster. Now, there is no end to it. You could always keep on arguing the additional boosters would boost your immunities further, but that doesn't happen, and that is not really required. I don't know whether this vaccine is going to be efficient against the newer variants, and I have my doubts against it. I believe it may not be effective. There are so many. I was reading in one paper. In fact, there was a discussion came up in our CCI group only that couple of companies, a couple of corporates, couple of studies are advocating that if you take the third booster, it would be enough to give you protection against Omicron as well. I think with so many mutations, we may not have enough antibodies targeting all epitopes which are newly formed epitopes. With mutation, the genetic structures changes there, and these antibodies may not recognize them, and hence probably developing adequate immunity against those viruses would be difficult. At the same time, what was said earlier, I would echo the same thing. Irrespective of whatever variant is available in community, it's your responsibility to take vaccination, because that is the only way, trust me, the only way to improve herd immunity, and that is the cheapest way to improve herd immunity. If you go by infection route, in the sense if virus is allowed to spread to improve your herd immunity, you will have some mortality with it. Whatever little mortality is there with it, but that would mean lives lost. Vaccination is the only strategy where you can develop herd immunity without losing a life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then there are a lot of questions. Dr. also has asking from Rajasthan, and there are a few more participants. Those who they're asking that whether this Omicron is causing a milder disease or whether it is causing a severe disease. What is the data up till now and what mortality with Omicron? So I think this is something which we all don't know at present, but still I would like to know the data up till now. I think I have one good news to share at present with you, that around 6:30, 6:45 there was a news which said that in Mumbai they sampled genomic sequences of 211 COVID positive RT-PCR positive patients. Out of them, only 2 were this Omicron variant. So if you see that 5%, if we see that if they are screening, but here we have screened almost 211 patients, and out of them only 2 were Omicron positive. So maybe we don't have that much of case record at present to answer these questions, but still, because there are few questions in the chat box about this. Dr. Gurpreet, your opinion about whether it is going to cause a milder disease or a severe disease, or what is the data up till now?
Yeah, right now definitely data is not there. Even from South Africa, still we don't have that kind of data where we can tell what is going to happen. But I believe Omicron will be of less severity. Definitely, transmissibility definitely will be very high. It looks like. But as I said, vaccination as well as reinfection, which is going to happen. The people who have got vaccinated, who already got COVID, probably the immune system will be quite good to fight this disease. Also, as I said, the diagnostics are there, the awareness is there, the treatment is there. In that way, I think, let us hope that it may not kill more people, especially in our scenario. So this is, I believe, and I hope. I don't know what is going to happen, but definitely the immune system is going to work. As well as I have a strong belief that basically testing and treatment is going to save our population. Vaccination is important. It has to be there. Along with that, definitely testing and treatment, early treatment is what is important.
Yes, very rightly said, and that as compared to in last 2 years, we have now a lot of knowledge about how to deal with these particular diseases. We have a lot of vaccinated population. We have people, those who have natural immunity, which says to last longer, maybe up to 6 to 8 months also after the infection, and plus post-vaccination. So I think we should get a milder disease as compared to what we had with the Delta variant. And most of the papers at present still focus on the Delta variant as the major cause of morbidity and mortality as compared to Omicron. So I think we should still focus upon what is available with us and to have use COVID appropriate behavior, to use our therapies wisely, and uh, focus on prevention more than the thinking about what else can be done for about the mortality and these are other variants which we really don't know about. There are certain unanswered questions for all of this. So Dr. Agam sir, your take on this? Is it going to be mild, or you feel it is going to be a severe disease? As you said that you might be expecting a wave, or you feel that the cases may increase in last week of Jan or first week of February?
First of all, before I answer that question, allow me to announce that we already have 190 logins. So more than 1,200 doctors are currently live, and credit goes to you, Mahavir Bhai, for conducting this program so well and taking up so relevant questions. Talking about I hope, wish and pray that disease remains mild. That's all that I can say at this stage. We don't have enough data. If you look at South African data also, data would take time. In the sense, they're not telling us about what is happening today. Whatever data you have is talking about the last week's experience. And probably it would be very difficult at this stage to talk about it. Whatever understanding we have as of now makes us feel that it would be mild, but it would affect large proportion of cases. So we'll have more number of cases, but we are likely to have milder disease. That is what is the understanding today. We have 2 more new therapeutic options coming up. We have newer cocktail antibody coming up. We have a newer antiviral coming up. We have a lot of population which is vaccinated, and hence now when patients comes, your first choice would be antiviral or cocktail antibody remains a big question mark. So there is yet a lot to understand. So once we have experience and once probably we see the trend that is happening, and many things would affect it. Your individual level COVID appropriate behavior, the policymakers' decision, and the restrictions on international travel. In fact, I just read that all international travel, there is a ban till 31st of January. If I don't know whether how authentic is the news. Just while preparing for this talk, I got a message saying that for next 1.5 months, imagine if there is going to be complete ban on international travel. It may help you in reducing spread of Omicron. I don't know whether it's going to be a boon or a bane. I don't know.
Yes. Now you are touched upon these new antivirals, and I know that our audience also is extremely excited to know about these new molecules as new and new variants are coming. But we as human beings and scientists over here, they are getting new molecules, and we have such new molecule. This is molnupiravir. We don't know whether it is going to be active only against some variants of COVID, or it is going to be active against all variants of COVID. But whatever the data says is that it is going to be definitely both in the treatment. So Dr. Yugandhar, I would like to know your view about this new antiviral, this molnupiravir, and what does the data say?
Regarding this antiviral drug, definitely it will be working. We hope it should work. But till now, remdesivir and steroids in a proper timing and supportive care are the main drugs, apart from the cocktail and all those things. Initial part of each drug introduced into the market, it will be overemphasized about the results, but practically we are seeing only half of the results. So it is yet to comment about what is the in vivo results rather than in vitro theory.
I want to add.
Yes, please.
With your permission, I have my doubts against you have 2 different school of thought. Somebody who's a staunch believer of favipiravir, somebody is a staunch believer of remdesivir, and I belong to the second category. I believe remdesivir was useful only for severe cases, and I'm convinced that only patient requires hospitalization, requires ICU, hypoxia. In that situation with other treatment, including dexamethasone, my choice would go for remdesivir. But if used in earlier phases, I have always believed, and in fact, I have in my limited capacity with group of senior doctors, have published a paper which came in JAMA, which said during pandemic, any fever pending result should be treated as COVID, and COVID. In whatever is the pandemic. So we have COVID pandemic going on. Any patient who presents to you with flu-like symptoms, you cannot think of anything else. It has to be COVID suspicion, and you have to start antiviral at that time. Now you have reports which are available. Now you have kits which are available where patient can do this kits at their home before doing a rapid antigen test in the lab. But I'm talking of time about 1.5 years ago, and since then I have kept that. If you put patients at the right time on this drugs, that means first day, I believe any patient, say Agam Vora gets fever, and he has one risk factor, say diabetic, say hypertension, say obesity, say smoking, this patient would be put on treatment. And then you see good results. I believe that a lot of you may argue that I may overtreat in that situation, and those patients may not require anything. But I'm very much comfortable overtreating patients when, especially I'm doing it at home, and especially when I'm doing it for disease which has got such high mortalities. And third, my intention to treat them is, if I treat them early, they become negative faster and their spread to community is lesser. I want to add to what was discussion going on regarding oral antiviral. Molnupiravir is the new antiviral which will be approved this week, and we are going to be seeing it's available this week itself. Maybe, I think this week is over, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So maybe by Monday or Tuesday, we are likely to see that available. The difference between favipiravir and molnupiravir, to my understanding, molnupiravir is virucidal and favipiravir is virostatic. That's the difference. Favipiravir would require loading dose. Molnupiravir will not require loading dose. So it will have a standard twice daily dosages. And the treatment is only 5 days. Where favipiravir recommendation is 14 days, though most of us give it for 7 to 10 days in most of the situation. But yes, we have given it up to 14 days. Whereas molnupiravir is only for 5 days. So that these are the slight differences. Of course, there is difference in their mechanism. It's not like the same mechanism that you had with favipiravir and remdesivir. Both had same mechanism. So here there is difference in mechanism. I don't think that since it works on the same pathway, I don't think both oral antivirals can be combined. And I believe there are no major side effects as of now with this molecule. It may be introduced in Indian market as 200 milligram tablets. And in soon, you will have 400 and 800 also coming in market. The dose recommended is 800 milligram twice daily for 5 days. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, even I am also very excited to use about this new drug. And one thing what COVID has told or taught all of us is to act on time. And what Dr. Agam sir said rightly is that if your patient during pandemic gets a fever on the first day, even my strategy was always to hit it hard with whatever antiviral we have it available. So remdesivir was definitely an injectable, and then there were a lot of restrictions. You must be remembering those days where the beds were full and remdesivir shortage was there. So it was to be used in patients, those who have borderline hypoxia and those who were getting hospitalized, and not for each and every case. But think about a drug like molnupiravir, if it is coming up and if it is an available oral drug, I think it can be definitely a game changer. And the data up till now, which has been maybe a company-driven data, we still don't know exactly unless we use it practically in our population. But the data up till now shows that almost 80% efficacy in treating this kind of viral infections if it is given early and at home. So it can be a game changer. So thank you for bringing this topic about this new antivirals, and we are all excited to use them. So Dr. Ratna, you are quiet. Now I want to again come back to you. There is one question which some people have asked, and even I have myself, that whenever we read a report of RT-PCR and then there is a CT value, and you were discussing about this S gene and then the G gene. So how do you actually interpret that report? Do you see all those parameters into consideration? And what is the value of CT value? What is the value of CT value, especially the patient, those who are reinfected or after vaccination, they are doing their RT-PCR and after 4 days, it comes out to be positive with very high CT values of 34, 35. Do you consider them as infectious? So your take on this, because I think you're the best person amongst the panelists and amongst all of our case physicians to answer this.
Yeah, so basically it depends on which kit a company is using or hospital is using. There are different targets which are used, that can be S gene, N gene, E gene, and along with RDR. So these are the different genes. So different kits have different combinations. Each hospital or institute or even a government sector decides which kits they are using based on their experience. So that's how different this is picked up. The COVID-19 is picked up. Coming to the cycle threshold, CT value is basically a cycle threshold. So this is again defined by the which manufacturer's kit you are using. In general, you can say higher threshold means that the viral load is less. So that is important. So cycle threshold, if it is very high, like about 35 like that, the viral load is lesser. And if the viral load is very high, the cycle threshold less. I have seen like even 6, 8 like that. When we had the second wave, we have seen cycle threshold of 6 and 8 also. So that means that there is a very high viral load in that person. And that means the person is more infective because that he has a more chance of transmitting the infection. So we do look at it. General, you can say between 20 to 30, it comes positive. Below 20, it's high positive. Above 30, you have to correlate it with the clinical findings. That's why there is a variation. And there was, if you see initially, there was not a uniformity and it became a bit of a more interpretation by each lab. And that's when ICMR came up with a cutoff that if it's above 35, you should report it as negative. That was one of the things. So that uniformity came across after that. Otherwise, the interpretations for all these RT-PCRs are done by the molecular biologist looking at the cycle thresholds. That is one thing. Now, the second question I think you asked is post-vaccination if someone tests positive. See, as of now, whatever kits we have worked with and have had experience with, none of them pick up a RT-PCR because of the vaccine. It doesn't. We have looked at it. There were a lot of time concerns. I think many a times it happened because of the hotspots where we stand and go for vaccination, or we had already been exposed and in the incubation period and we had taken a vaccine. So after that period, it happened. So it can be attributed to these two things if you see that. But cycle threshold value is important to look at the infectivity and the viral load. That's how we look at these things.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody would like to add anything? Yes, Abhay?
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry. Yes, after
CT
you.
value definitely gives us about the viral load, but this does not mean that patient is non-infectious and he can move freely. That is a takeoff by the clinicians. So they shouldn't be in a doubt that CT value is high, 30, 32. They are non-infectious and they will freely move around in the family as well as in social gathering. That is important. Definitely it gives us the other point is it depends upon when we are sampling. During the early phase of the disease where replication is very high and you will have a lower CT value, and later on it may come down. We have seen CT values of more than 30 after 1 month also. So that is a takeoff.
I want to add to it. To me, CT values, be it on your RT-PCR report or be it on your radiology, has got no clinical significance. Correct me if I'm wrong. I would always, I believed and I've seen, and I'm sure everybody of you here has seen, whatever be your CT values, whatever be your CT scan values, the clinical presentation may not match hand in hand, and your treatment depends on clinical presentation. So it is good to understand about RT-PCR CT values. It is good to look at your CT scans of the patient, but trust me, your treatment decisions are taken on clinical grounds only. Thank you.
Agree with you. Yes. So I think
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Like that Dr. Vora is saying, that is why when we say CT value, we talk about the viral load. It does not mean the severity of the disease. That we had been also from the beginning been saying. Doesn't mean high viral load will be having a severe disease. So that is one thing. Just wanted to add.
So very valid points by all the panelists. And I think because we are discussing about Omicron viral pneumonias also, there are certain questions in the chat box about the influenza and para-influenza also. And I would like to take some questions about this influenza also. And we all know that we are definitely dealing with a lot of cases with influenza, and especially maybe after our COVID wave, after the second wave of COVID was about to end, we were getting a lot of patients with high-grade fever, and the case which I presented, that was also come out to be human metapneumovirus. Same time, we had a lot of outbreaks of this respiratory syncytial virus. We had a lot of cases with influenza. And at least in my opinion, it was a dictum. Any patient coming with fever and COVID-19, we were hitting it hard with oseltamivir. And the patients used to respond. Many of these patients, maybe influenza A test was positive, or because the tests were not done all the time, but they responded very well clinically to this particular oseltamivir. So I would like to know our panelists that did you also see such kind of trends in your practice when the COVID was about, I mean, it was the cases were receding. That time you saw a lot of surge about these new viruses, especially RSV virus and the influenza virus. Yes, Dr. Yugandhar, what
Yes,
was
sir.
your practice? Yes.
At the end of second wave, as you rightly mentioned, influenza is surge is there. Whether you diagnose or empirically started oseltamivir, they used to respond. Apart from the atypical organisms like scrub typhus also with that whatever routine oral doxy. And regarding this other virus, respiratory syncytial virus, though you cannot identify, you can treat according to the symptomatic management, and these such is more. According to epidemiology, most of the times one virus will dominate in a given point of time. In that part, it was changing that dominance from second wave of COVID to some influenza virus or dengue, and now it is turn of Omicron. Hopefully, it should be a milder form, and that is the way of ending of pandemic from to pandemic to endemic.
Okay. Anybody else, Dr. Gurpreet?
Yeah, definitely. With the end of this second wave, we have encountered many patients, and in our area, there were a lot of scrub typhus. Though Punjab is like a plain, but earlier we used to have scrub typhus from a hilly area like Himachal, but now it has come to our fields, and every year we are getting a lot of scrub typhus. Leptospira, again, sporadic cases will come. Influenza is quite common, and we have diagnosed 10 cases of H1N1 in last 2 months. So that is what I was telling. It depends upon where you are working, whether you have those facilities available. It is better to do a nasopharyngeal swab, send it for like a flu panel or a biofire, and try to pinpoint what is going on instead of treating them with all the antibiotics. So definitely the viral pneumonias, they are quite common, and with this we are able to diagnose them, we are able to treat them, and it's very, very important to isolate them. As you have rightly mentioned, it is one of the cause of hospital-acquired pneumonias also. So unless and until we are able to diagnose them properly, keep them in an isolation, that is very, very important, so that we are able to save our other patients. Also important, in your slide only you have mentioned this viral pneumonia, but along with that probably H influenza was also positive. So double infections are also quite common, and sometimes we have to treat empirically with the antibiotic unless until we have a positive report. And if we are able to do lower respiratory tract specimens like sputum or BAL, that is also important to diagnose them and treat them appropriately.
Yes. Point very well taken. And because you mentioned about both the samples, nasopharyngeal swab as well as the sputum or the bronchial lavage. So I would like to know from our panelists, for a patient with viral pneumonia and you want to do a respiratory biofire, which sample you will prefer? You will prefer a nasopharyngeal swab or you will prefer a sputum or bronchial lavage? So this is a question which has been, because many times we get a call, we order for a test of respiratory biofire, then our junior doctor will come and ask us, or somebody from the ward will call us, whether we should ask the patient to send nasopharyngeal swab or patient is not able to expectorate. So what should we doing? And if suppose a patient who has viral pneumonia on the chest X-ray, suppose we are thinking about a viral pneumonia diagnosed on the chest X-ray, typical interstitial infiltrates and bacterial etiology is all negative, and you find out human rhinovirus in the patient's nasopharyngeal swab, can you attribute the pneumonia which is there in the CT to the human rhinovirus which has been isolated in the nasopharyngeal swab? So I would like to know from the panelists, maybe one by one, you all can answer this, and which will be your preferred sample in pneumonia patient, whether it will be upper respiratory swab or a lower respiratory sample.
See, definitely, if we are confused about viral as well as bacterial, then better is to take the lower respiratory tract sample, because you will be able to pick up bacterial infections also from lower respiratory tract sampling, whether it is sputum or BAL. Most of the viral infections will be picked up by nasopharyngeal, but you may miss bacterial infections. So if we are able to take lower respiratory tract sample, it will be better, so that you can have a whole syndromic pathogens diagnosis in one go. Otherwise, if that sample is not available, patient is not producing sputum, or we are not able to do bronchoscopy, maybe because it's early disease, the risk of contamination or risk of spread of infection, then you can go for a nasopharyngeal swab, especially if you are if you are thinking more in terms of viral infection based upon the patient history as well as radiology. So this is my takeoff. I can go for both the sampling.
Yes, Dr. Yugandhar.
Yeah, regarding if somebody asked me to diagnose viral pneumonia with the invasive investigation, definitely I prefer BAL over nasopharyngeal. But as Gurpreet sir told rightly, if it is not able to do unstable and more infectious, non-availability will sports that nasopharyngeal, sir. If the colonization identified at the nasopharynx and it may not be contributing to the pneumonia lower respiratory tract. In that sense, just identifying the organism may not be clinically important to treat if it is taken from the upper respiratory tract.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Agam sir, how frequently do you use this multiplex PCR or maybe biofire assays? And do you think that they are really valuable because the cost is huge? They cost not community-acquired pneumonia. You feel that these tests are always indicated, especially when you're not able to pinpoint a bacteria.
Trust me, in your clinical practice, there is no need of doing any test. See, when you have a community-acquired pneumonia patient coming to you in OPD, for example, and who does not have any risk factor, a garden variety of community-acquired pneumonia in patient who's non-hypertensive, non-diabetic, has not been exposed to antibiotics in recent past, in my opinion, does not require any test. Hello? In my opinion, no tests are required there. You would do this test only for high-risk patient. If you're deciding to admit this patient, or if this patient has got uncontrolled diabetes, underlying renal failure, underlying, kidney failure, whatever risk factors, in that situation, you would do it. I'm very fond of late doing urine antigen test. So you have urine Legionella and Streptococci test happening in minutes. It's like your urine pregnancy test. You have a spot urine test. You could actually start doing this kind of test in your OPDs, or if you have a nearby access to laboratory. By the time patient is waiting for his CBC report, X-ray report, he can do his spot urine and you can get answer about Legionella and Streptococci immediately with decent sensitivity and specificity. I would reserve this kind of test, viral test, only for patients where I'm suspecting viral and where I'm suspecting patient having immunocompromised disorders. Because in most of the situations, these viral infections are self-limiting and they respond to conventional line of treatment that you offer. Again, when you ask for this biofire, off late I've started asking for biofire with their CT values again. Because this biofire would give you many a times multiple bugs and you may not really be able to differentiate what is responsible, though you don't have many choice. Even if I differentiate between multiple viruses, my therapeutic options are limited. But still, if I'm doing it, I might as well do it with their cutoff values or their CT values, as it would tell me what kind of viruses to target your treatment to, because every virus which is present in airways may not require treatment. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Excellent feedback, Agamji. And I think we are all clinicians and we definitely value our patients' money. And whenever we have a patient who is very high risk, maybe immunocompetent, or a patient who is a transplant recipient, and we are thinking about viral pneumonias, these cases or these kind of tests can be used and not routinely for each and every patient. Now, there are a few more questions in the chat box and they are all again for viral pneumonias. I think we have discussed most of them. One more very important question from Dr. Monisha Sila from Andhra Pradesh. She wants to know that whether antibody cocktail therapy is going to work for Omicron. So again, a question which I think nobody has a clear answer for all this, because although We know that it is the neutralizing antibodies. If you see, the neutralizing antibodies are going to neutralize many of the Omicron variants, but whether these kind of cocktail therapies are going to be effective or not, we don't know, and the time is going to tell. And Dr. Agam also has just mentioned that there are some newer antibody cocktails which are coming up in the market, and definitely pharma companies, and there must be a lot of research going on to find out what kind of antibody cocktail can be used for combating this particular disease. Any take on this? Anybody will like to answer this?
Yes, there are at least 3 cocktail antibodies in pipeline, and GSK's cocktail antibody is almost waiting for that emergency approval. So very likely with this Omicron surge going on, there will be emergency approval for this cocktail antibody, and whatever initial reports I've read says that of course needs to be, I don't know how reliable are those WhatsApp messages. So I've not read it from very authentic sources, but whatever information I've got makes me feel that probably the newer cocktail antibody may have more success rates when it comes to Omicron variant. And in the South Africa, by and large, all these new tests, they have not found Delta variant. So all their variants have changed from Delta to Omicron, and probably that trend continues across the globe. We would see that kind of change. So from Delta, we may move to this, and there the newer cocktail antibodies may have some edge over the conventional. Of course, the experience would tell us more over time. Thank you.
I think a lot of more questions about this Omicron, but we have dealt with almost all of them, and because the infectivity, about their complications, about now Dr. Manasi from Maharashtra, Mumbai, she wants to know if a patient is asked for booster dose, should we promote them? So this is a question I think our government is not going to allow any one of us to take a booster dose. And I think if some of us, if we are able to get that third dose, my personal opinion about this is that this is not going to be a authentic third dose. You are not going to get a certificate for that third dose. So even whenever you want to go abroad, you want to travel, and when this booster dose is going to be mandatory, so that time you may not be having the authentic certificate of this. So I think at present, it is going to be a personal choice whether we should give a booster dose, if we should promote it or not. I would like to know from our panelists that what is their take on, and if somebody is getting a booster dose, should we promote them to take a booster dose or no?
No, I think we shouldn't do this unless and until Government of India approves it and we have adequate data. It should not be promoted. So my personal take is we should just stick for 2 doses as of now. We have to know the efficacy, we have to know the side effects, we have to know a lot of things before promoting the third or booster dose.
Yes.
I have slightly different views in the way that till the time I was not too sure about vaccine efficacy. I was always of the opinion that I would recommend third booster dose after 6 months of the your first booster. That means you take one now. After 1 month, I took the second one, Covishield, because that time the recommendation was to take it after a month. And then 6 months of that, I would recommend another booster dose of a different platform. In the sense, if I have taken Covishield, maybe I would take a Covaxin. And though our government does not support it, though it is not available in the program, though it may not be wise to keep on taking vaccines like this, but I have always believed that this kind of shots would help, especially you and me healthcare providers who are daily into COVID management, especially all those high risk people, like say you have a patient on dialysis, where you just cannot maintain that social distancing. Those 10 patients in Mumbai, though it will be in such a small cabin, it's as good as they're lying one above the other. In that situation, I am for it. So I'm just waiting for government to announce that third dose can be very easily taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think this answers our next question from Dr. Ashwin from Kerala. So he wants to know that as healthcare professional, do we need a booster dose of vaccine in the current scenario where Omicron poses a threat? So I think Dr. Agam sir has already mentioned that yes, whenever given a choice, we can take we don't know whether it is going to prevent us from Omicron. We definitely don't know that, but maybe the mixing and matching.
Forget about that dose. Have you taken your influenza pneumococcal vaccine? Let me ask you this. Why are we talking about only this? I want everybody to take influenza vaccine. You and me must take. And I would tell you, I have been taking it for the last 22 years. Since the time I've started my practice, I take this vaccine every year. I give all my staff this vaccine once in a year, and that is what I strongly recommend. I strongly recommend one shot of conjugate vaccine pneumonia for sure. It is must for everybody, and I think we have come to the end of discussion where I see Ravi with family here to introduce. Ravi bhai, is that your chotu?
Sir, good evening all. This is
Hi,
Darshil.
happy birthday, my dear.
His fifth
What?
birthday today.
What's his name?
He's Darshil, sir. Darshil Dost.
Darshil. Hi, Darshil. And you have
Hi,
your uncle
Darshil.
here in Mumbai. Your papa forgot to introduce, you see? And you're going to forget. You have almost 1,200 uncles and aunties waiting to wish you happy birthday. And I take the privilege of wishing you happy birthday on behalf of those 1,200 logins. Happy birthday, dear.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so
Happy
much.
birthday.
So where are you?
Happiness of the day, dear Darshil. And thank you, Ravi bhai, for always being so supportive. And without you, this program is not going to happen. And I think I will take this opportunity to thank every one of you, Dr. Krishna, Dr. Vijay, Dr. Ravi, Dr. Narayana, and of course, our extreme panelists. So I think without support of all of you, this program wouldn't have been successful. So anything else we want to discuss, or we can
Thank you.
take few more questions here, Dr. Ravi bhai.
I also must thank you on behalf of the entire panel here that success of any program is in its moderation. And Mahavir bhai, the way you moderated this particular discussion and you give justice to all the questions that came in chat box, you have not missed any question. So I must thank you for doing it so well. And of course, my co-panelists who were real stars because of their input, this program such success. Krishna, I did not see. I was very much hopeful that I would see him on screen. Krishna, milte nahi hai, pan on screen to dikhna chahiye. So I request you to come on screen for some time if it's possible. And yes, 1,200 plus logins on a working day evening speaks its volumes, and it speaks how committed you are in the fight against COVID. And I'm sure with this kind of commitment, Mahavir, you remember that TB quote, TB harega and Desh jeetega. I think I'm sure COVID harega and Desh jeetega. So you and me are definitely going to win this Omicron and whatever variants are on the way. I'm sure we would be able to look after our patients well. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Krishna, harega.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Ravi bhai, any final comments?
Ravi
Or
bhai,
can we close?
Bachu. No, I think Darshil ke sath rehne do abhi unko. Haan?
Okay, chale. No problem.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ratnamani. Very nice. I mean, we were always wanting to have a microbiologist with us, and thank you so much for beautiful insights, Dr. Gurpreet, Dr. Yugandhar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for the perfect
Thank you.
moderation.
Keep the program absolutely live. I mean, more than the moderation, I think what is important is your support to the moderation. That is what makes the program successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Good
So
night.
with all your permission, Dr. Vijay Kumar, can we close the session?
Yeah, please.